On the very first page of The Little Prince, before the story even properly begins, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry shows us a drawing, a shapeless lump that most adults immediately identify as a hat. It's actually a boa constrictor that has just swallowed an elephant whole. That single joke tucked into the opening pages of what looks like a simple children's book quietly sets up one of the most devastating meditations on adulthood ever written. Because the real subject of this book was never children at all. It's what happens to the rest of us long after we stop being one. The adults who only see hats. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's narrator tells us, almost in passing, that he gave up drawing as a child after adults repeatedly failed to see anything in his pictures except hats, insisting instead that he focus on more sensible subjects like geography, history, arithmetic. It's a small, wry anecdote, and it's also the entire thesis of the book, compressed into 2 pages. Adults, according to Saint-Exupéry, have systematically lost the ability to see past the literal shape of things, and have replaced that lost imagination with an obsession for facts, figures, and matters of consequence. This becomes the narrator's running complaint throughout the book, that grown-ups, when told about a new friend, never ask what that friend's voice sounds like or what games they enjoy, but instead ask how old they are, how much they weigh, how much money their family makes. It's a gentle indictment, delivered with real affection rather than contempt, but it lands with surprising force on anyone reading this as an adult, quietly aware of exactly how many conversations in their own life have gone precisely that way. A parade of lonely grown-ups. Before the little prince ever reaches Earth, he meets a string of tiny, solitary planets, each occupied exactly by one adult, and each of them a small, devastating caricature of a very particular kind of grown-up failure. There's a king who rules over absolutely no one, but insists on being obeyed anyway. A vain man who wants nothing except endless admiration, unable to hear anything but praise. A businessman who spends his life owning the stars by counting them, convinced that counting something is the same as understanding or even caring about it. A drunkard caught in a small, sad loop, drinking to forget the shame of drinking. The only adult the little prince doesn't dismiss entirely is a lamplighter, endlessly, exhaustingly lighting and extinguishing his lamp because his tiny planet spins so fast a full day lasts only a minute, an absurd, impossible task, and yet the one adult in the entire sequence who is thinking about something beyond himself. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry isn't just writing whimsical fantasy here. He's laying out, one small planet at a time, an entire taxonomy of the ways adulthood can quietly narrow a person's entire existence down to power, ego, escapism, or possession, until almost nothing of real wonder is left. If this gentle, quietly devastating satire is already resonating with you, you don't need the physical book to keep going with it. You can listen to The Little Prince as an audiobook through Amazon Audible, at work, in the car, or during any of those moments in your day when actually sitting down to read isn't realistic. Right now, you can try the subscription for practically nothing, and I'll leave the link down in the description if you're curious. What the fox actually teaches. When the little prince finally reaches Earth, he meets a fox who asks strangely to be tamed, to have a relationship deliberately, patiently built between them, rather than remaining strangers. The fox explains that before being tamed, the prince is just one boy among millions to him, and he is just one fox among millions to the prince. But once they build something together, however small, however ordinary it might look from the outside, they become irreplaceable to each other. It's through this friendship that the prince finally understands his relationship to the rose he left behind on his own tiny planet, a rose he'd started to believe was ordinary, one among thousands just like her growing in a garden on Earth. The fox's real lesson, gently delivered, is one most adults spend a lifetime forgetting and occasionally painfully relearning, that what makes anything essential isn't found by looking at it objectively, but by looking at it through everything you've invested in it. The rose matters because of the time spent caring for her, not because of thousands of identical roses elsewhere. Saint-Exupéry is quietly arguing against an entire adult worldview built on interchangeability and efficiency, insisting instead that love, attention, and time are what transform something ordinary into something irreplaceable. Why this book breaks adults specifically. Children reading this book often experience it as a strange, beautiful adventure. Adults reading it tend to experience something closer to grief, recognizing themselves uncomfortably in the king, the businessman, the vain man, the narrator who forgot how to draw. By the time the story reaches its quiet, aching final pages, where the prince arranges to leave his body behind on Earth in order to return to his rose, most adult readers aren't just witnessing a fictional loss, they're confronting everything the book has spent its entire length gently accusing them of forgetting. That's precisely why this small children's book has spent over 80 years quietly devastating grown adults, far more than it ever seems to unsettle children. Kids read it as a fantasy about a boy from a tiny planet. Adults read it as a mirror held up to exactly how much wonder, attention, and tenderness gets quietly sacrificed somewhere between childhood and everything we now call being responsible. Saint-Exupéry never blames us outright for this. He simply gently makes it impossible to keep pretending we haven't lost something worth mourning. Before we close this one out, if this small story has left something larger sitting with you, remember you don't need the physical book to spend more time with it. The full audiobook of The Little Prince is available through Amazon Audible, so you can listen during your commute, at work, or in any moment when picking up an actual book isn't realistic. The trial subscription is practically free right now, and the link will be waiting for you in the description below. In the end, The Little Prince was never really written for children at all. It was written for every adult who once knew how to see a boa constrictor swallowing an elephant, and who slowly, quietly, without ever quite noticing the moment it happened, learned to only see the hat. Saint-Exupéry doesn't promise us we can fully get that vision back. He simply insists it's still worth trying to look again. Remember to subscribe, comment, like, and see you next time.